Hello, Maniacs, and welcome back to another episode of Cult Classic Mania. I am your host, Matthew, and this episode is brought to you by CultCelebrities.com, the end-all resources for everything Cult Classic. They create the internet's most comprehensive trove of B-list celebrities, direct-to-video movies, cult films, news from the underground film scene, and much more. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at CCMPod. You can follow us on Instagram at Cult Classic Mania. If you feel like supporting us monetarily, you can go to do so by going to patreon.com/Cult Classic Mania. That's all I got for you this week, and this episode I am talking about Idle Hands from 1999, directed by Rodman Flender.
We come in peace.
Fuck ass, give me a beer!
Yeah, welcome back to the cinema. This is not for the typical. Time to feed the occipital lobe with the films that I call my home. Buckle up, settle in, we'll be breaking down a bit. Got a new take, make an old film relevant. About to give attention to the unsung revenants of the film industry. That's a wrap, let's riff.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Cult Classic Mania.
Hello, Maniacs, and welcome back to another episode of Cult Classic Mania, a podcast dedicated to the low-budget disasters that we all know and love. Not all of them are low budget, but they definitely can be disasters. I am your host, Matthew, and this week we are talking about Idle Hands from 1999. This film isn't a low budget disaster, but it is a disaster in its own right, with a budget of $25 million and a box office earning of $4.2 million. And much like Mars Attacks, I don't really remember a whole lot about Idle Hands. Granted, this film came out when I was roughly 4 or 5 years old, and I didn't see it until I was about 10 or 11 probably. And I think of the first time I saw it, it was probably on either Spike TV or MTV, one of those shitty teen TV channels. But yeah, that's about all I remember from it. And I don't remember it being that good in general. I remember them talking about how it's like the greatest horror comedy of the year. And I don't, even whenever I was a kid, I don't remember laughing at it at all. And I was like, when's the comedy gonna come in? I don't remember laughing whatsoever at any time. I'll get into that a little bit later on. Idle Hands is directed by Rodman Flender, who unfortunately did Leprechaun 2, Nature of the Beast, and Demon of Paradise. And it does look like he was also a writer, and he wrote a few episodes for Tales from the Crypt, Party of 5, which is my favorite 90s family TV drama, and some episodes, of course, of The Office. The main writers for Idle Hands were Terry Hughes. He is mostly a producer and not really a writer, but he was known for shows like Supernatural, Alpha, Eureka, and also Ron Meebauer, who also has the same writer credits like Terry Hughes. I think Terry was probably like, hey, I'm working on this film. You probably need work, so do you want to work alongside with me? And they just made this one shitty horror comedy film. Yeah, A-list cast of Idle Hands, if you want to call it that, stars Seth Green from Austin Powers. As most of you know, he played Scott, Dr. Evil's son. And he also did Chris's voice for Family Guy, Without a Paddle, which is my favorite Seth Green film, and much, much more. And also stars a young Devin Sawa, who is known for SLC Punk. He did the voice of Casper, as well as Final Destination 1. There's also Eldon Henson, who is known for playing on Daredevil as Foggy. He did the Butterfly Effect, Lords of Dogtown. And unfortunately, last but definitely not least, Jessica Alba, who was on Machete, Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. And much like the rest of the actors and actresses, she couldn't really act in this film. Like, Seth Green is probably the only decent actor in this film. And that's saying a lot if I'm saying that Seth Green, out of all the people in this cast, is the only decent actor. That's saying a lot. Idle Hands was released April 30th, 1999, with, like I mentioned before, a budget of $25 million. And a box office earning of roughly $4.2 million. If you're fortunate enough to never stumble upon this film and don't know what it's about a 17-year-old Anton Tobias, who is played by Devin Sawa. He wakes up on Halloween morning to discover that his parents have been turned into 2 headless Halloween decorations, and his 2 moron friends, Mick, who is played by Seth Green, and Peanut, who is played by Eldon Henson. After speaking to them, he learns that his right hand has a bloodthirsty mind of its own. It's hell-bent on wreaking havoc among the innocent within the town that he resides in. I was honestly curious as to why this film did so bad in the first place, even for opening day, because the cast is pretty huge, mind you, like Seth Green, Jessica Alba, Eldon Henson, Devin Sawa, all these people that went on to be A-list celebrities, pretty much. At least, well, Seth Green in the 90s was at least an A-list celebrity. He kind of fell off, but well, whatever. During my research, whenever I was looking things up, it didn't even come to my mind thinking about it. But the Columbine shooting was April 20th, 1999, a week before this happened, the release of the film. So I can kind of see why. But whenever I was doing my research, I noticed that CNN wrote an article days before the release of Idle Hands with the headline of Idle Hands, a post-Columbine test of the movie market. And people assume that the line, will the gates of hell open wide at the high school dance and drag the innocent soul into eternal damnation? And I guess people took that the wrong way and thought it was sort of like, it's sort of like not sympathizing with the Columbine shooting. But this was the 90s also, and people thought way too hard about everything in terms of art, music, and film. Like, even Nirvana, people were, like, reading too much into their lyrics. Like, I remember there being, like, a huge debate about the song Rape Me by Nirvana. And even today, people still debate about that song. Like, people just read way too much into everything. I doubt that was the angle that they were going for. I doubt that Rodman Flender was being that insensitive about a very tragic incident that happened and that we still think about today. On to a more positive note. You guys know what time it is? I think you guys know what time it is. It's our most dearly beloved segment that you all come to know and love. It's time for...
Trivia time.
Honestly, the trivia is more interesting than the film itself, and I didn't realize how much behind the scenes there were in terms of trivia. But one of my favorite tidbits is the neighborhood that Anton lives in, for what they're showing, is actually the same neighborhood as the neighborhood from the original Halloween from 1978. Much better film than Idle Hands, mind you, but I thought that was pretty cool. And also the hand that's taking over Anton's body, it's the same hand that appears in the Addams Family film from 1991. They end up naming the hand, I think, Thing, and it's played by the magician Christopher Hart, who is also playing the hand in Idle Hands as well. Try to remember to cue you guys into what's going on whenever this comes up, but another bit of trivia where Anton, he ends up killing 2 police officers while his hand is killing 2 police officers. And there's a part where P-Nub, he shouts, "Go, go, Buffalo." And this is a reference to a deleted scene in which Anton remembers the 2 police officers as the head and ass of the school mascot. Go, 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 Buffalo. And I honestly didn't understand that. I'm like, why is he just shouting, "Go, go, go, Buffalo"? It didn't make any sense. But I'm glad that I actually caught on to that whenever I read this. If you guys have seen the film, you would know that the band The Offspring is featured in the film. And Dexter Holland, the vocalist, he is wearing a AFI shirt during the dance scene, and which is another California punk band who started out in 1991, and eventually he went on to release a few of their albums, actually, on Dexter's record label, Nitro Records. I actually didn't know that, and I love early AFI. Like, before they went emo and they kind of sold out, went mainstream, I loved those early AFI records. They were probably some of my favorite in like California punk material. Unfortunately, going back into the Columbine massacre, there is a part where Anton, he ends up killing his parents, and then he goes on to kill his best friends. And it wasn't intentional by any means. It was by accident because of his hand. But that filming of the scene was delayed because of the Columbine massacre. I think that in itself shows that the director was being sensitive towards a terrible tragedy that happened and wasn't trying to market this film as like, ooh, it's testing the waters as a Columbine market. Idle Hands isn't the best horror movie of all time. They do kind of pay homage to older horror films, which I thought was pretty cool. Mick and P-Nub, they're sitting on the couch, and a couple of times they'll show them sitting on the couch watching TV. And there was one point where they're watching the original Dawn of the Dead from 1978. And there was another time where they show them sitting on the couch watching TV, and they're watching the original Night of the Living Dead. I didn't mean to, but I've been giving away a lot of spoilers already in the trivia. But this film is already 21 years old, so I feel like a lot of you have already seen it by now, and a lot of you are actually excited for me to cover this film. I don't know why. But yeah, I'm giving away a lot of spoilers. I give away a lot of spoilers in all my episodes, so please don't get upset. This film, like I said, is 21 years old. So yeah, there's another part where Anton, he steals his neighbor's truck to go to the high school dance that they meet up with Molly. And there's actually a stunt double driving because Anton, or Devin Sawa, he did not have his license at the time because he was around 16 or 17. And the switch happens as the camera pans left. And I had to rewind that for a bit to see if that was actually true or not. And it is. So, IMDb, you don't always suck with your trivia. So, lastly, the title is a literal take on the saying, idle hands are the devil's playground, which derives from the Bible verse Proverbs 16:27. That begins, idle hands are the devil's workshop, meaning where there's nothing to do and too much free time, a person can wind up doing bad things. Because kids, remember, sinning is wrong, and you're gonna go to hell. So, on to the movie, shall we?
Anton Tobias never had much on his mind.
Don't you think you should have like a goal?
My dream life would be to lie around all day in bed and watch TV while some hot broad delivers me food.
And he always had time on his hands.
4 bodies have been discovered and the killer is still at large.
Until one of them got a mind of its own.
I have no control over my hand. It makes me do things I don't want it to do.
Aren't you a little old for Ding Dong Ditch?
Sorry about your bush.
Now,
I'm gonna call 911. What's the number?
I'm not the killer.
Okay.
his hand won't stop.
I don't want to hurt you. Don't!
Ew, that's disgusting.
His friends won't die.
You're dead.
Undead, actually. There was this big bright white light at the end of a long tunnel.
So what happened?
We were like, forget that, man. It's too far.
And the only way to stop it is to keep it busy.
Freeze!
Drop the knitting needles.
That's probably not a good idea. Put him down! Cuff me!
Put those needles down, young man! Down!
Cuff me!
Columbia Pictures presents
The police have no leads, and the killer is still out there.
You scream like a girl.
the comedy
Careful, it's on kind of loose. That's really starting to get on my nerves.
that dares to give scary movies
Oh, look at me! I'm Leatherface!
the backhand.
What you doing, man? That's my dad. Come on!
CPR, man. I saw it on Baywatch.
Idle Hands. The touching story of a boy and his hand.
Kinky.
For a white guy.
Let's get into the disaster that is Idle Hands. It's nighttime, and it looks like it's around Halloween time because there's decorations everywhere, and their house is all lit up with crazy decorations. And it starts out by Anton's mom, who is played by Connie Ray, asking the father, who is played by Fred Willard, if he blew out the decoration candles downstairs because she doesn't want the house to catch on fire. He responds yes, and this is when they start to go to bed. The mom gets up to shut off the lights, and as they go to bed and Connie is laying face down, she notices that on the ceiling there's a black light riding, and it says, "I'm under the bed." And this is when the father checks under the bed, but there's nothing there. And the father goes on to say it's probably a prank that Anton has pulled on them. And the mom is like, "Oh, poor Antony, he probably wouldn't have done that." And like, mind you, Anton later on, he's a total piece of shit and lazy and basically just, he's a total piece of shit, whatever. And she's like saying how he wouldn't do that. It's exactly what he would have done. Like, this person is terrible by all accounts. But whatever. And then I also forgot to mention that the father's name is actually Gary, who is played by Fred Willard. And they hear a weird noise downstairs, like crashing and everything. And this is when Gary, he goes to check on the noise that the mom heard, and this is when you hear Fred scream. The mom goes back to look for him, but ends up falling on Gary's blood, because apparently that's what the scream was. And the mom runs back upstairs to call 911, but the hand ends up actually being underneath the bed. And this is when the phone is pulled out from under her, and the hand ends up taking her as well by the ankle and pulling her under the bed. And this is when we get the title card, Idle Hands. We see Anton Tobias for the first time, who's played by Devin Sawa. He's waking up in the morning. At this point, he's going through his morning routine. He switches from his stereo to his Walkman, listening to some terrible pop song. I don't remember what it was. And at this point, he doesn't realize that his parents are dead as he's listening to the band Rancid. The song is Blood Clot. And there's a news report on TV talking about the murders that are happening around town. But he ends up switching into some cartoons as he's smoking a bowl of weed. And mind you, I'm pretty sure this is like a pro-weed film more than anything. Because like every other scene, someone is smoking weed. Like I smoke weed myself, but I'm not the type of person to like jam it down your throat and be like, oh dude, 420 bro, all the time. But like this is like so aggravating. We're like, oh, I'm freaking out right now. I better smoke some weed. I'm not doing anything, so let's smoke some weed. So like, literally, it's like Tally from South Park. I just want to get high. Like it's like that. It's pretty much what it reminds me of. But after all this point, he realizes that he's out of weed, and he calls his weed dealer for a dime bag because he's a cheap ass. Well, how much was a dime bag in 99? I'm not sure. It's probably a little bit cheaper now. Well, it's not. It's probably a little bit more expensive actually for a dime bag because the price of weed has gone up. But well, whatever. I'm going off in a different direction. But the dealer won't deliver to him because he is calling him a lazy ass and that he needs to go and get it himself. And this is when he goes to see his other burnout friends, who is played by Mick and Seth Green. That's Seth Green and Peanut, who is played by Eldon Henson, to mooch off of their weed. And Seth Green, or Mick, he goes on to say that their bong is out of commission. And Peanut claims if you combine nutmeg and oregano, you can get pretty wasted, dude. Because like, I don't know why. Even still today, that's like a theory that people have. Like if you combine nutmeg and oregano, you get really high. Like that's not how that works whatsoever. But whatever. Again, it doesn't matter. While Anton is trying to mooch off his friends for free weed, he mentions that he is in love with the girl next door, Molly, who is played by Jessica Alba. We learn all about the love interest at this point, and he explains this as she's pulling up to her house on her motorcycle. And at this point, Anton notices that Molly had dropped her lyric book. So this is the perfect way to ask her to the dance. He's trying to return the book back and be the knight in shining armor of for this girl, just for her book. After Anton constructs this genius plan to win Molly over, we get this location change of Beeper, Utah, at a jailhouse where an officer is escorting a Debbie Lecure, who is played by Vivica Fox. You may remember her as Vermita Green from Kill Bill. She's in that brutal fight scene where her and Uma Thurman, she ends up kicking her ass. But anyway, she's a nun. Well, she's disguised as a nun, but is actually a private detective, I guess. It's not really explained. She's just hunting after the hand, I guess. But she's going to see a prisoner at the jailhouse, and he's got some ugly, mangled beard, and it looks like he's in shock, and his hand is all shriveled up, and he's like shaking in shock, it looks like. And apparently this isn't what she was looking for, and she ends up storming out of the jailhouse saying it's gone. You can assume she's talking about the hand, but it's not explained yet. At that point, she makes it back to her Astro van camper, and she's going over all the places that she has visited to look for the hand. Well, that's what you're assuming that she's looking for at this point. It's pretty much obvious. And she notices that the map, wait for it, the map markings, wait for it, they create a pentagram. Not only is this pro-weed or possible Columbine scare, but they managed to add in the satanic panic as well. Good fucking job. Bravo. Meanwhile, Anton is pushing a cart full of groceries to his house, but he's blindsided and tackled by two idiot cops that clearly know who he is because they call him out by name. And later on, they're patrolling around his neighborhood, and they're like, "Whoa, isn't this Anton Tobias' home?" "Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure it is." And they literally know where he lives and know everything about him. Whatever, it doesn't matter. And they clearly know his name, and they ask him why he's in the neighborhood. Also, they have their guns pointed at him for no reason whatsoever. But this is when Anton, he has the bright idea. He proceeds to ask the cops if they have any weed on them. Are you fucking kidding me? This reminds me of the My Idiot Brother. I think it's Paul Rudd, where it's like in the very beginning, he's like asking the cops. Well, it's an undercover cop, and he's asking if they have weed. Oh gosh, they write him a $200 citation for having a bag of weed. Well, an empty bag of weed, and they charge him for littering. It's later that night, and we get a dumb, long montage of just him going off on a smoking ritual of what he does when he smokes weed. And finally, he notices that his parents are dead. When he sees a bloody knife, he uses to make a sandwich. After that, this is when he discovers his parents' bodies that are stuffed into some Halloween decorations. He gets startled, freaks out naturally, and he runs out to his front yard to puke. And this is when he is startled by his friends Mick and Peanut. And Anton tries to show his parents that he's dead, but are too distracted by a 2 Live Crew video playing on TV. And this is when Mick finally notices that an article of clothing is missing, is on the ground, and he realizes that it belongs to Anton's ripped shirt. And this is soon they realize that, well, at least Anton does. He notices that A and T is also written in blood on the ground. Anton quickly realizes that he is the killer, and Mick, in response, goes to call 911. Anton stops him by dislodging a glass bottle into Mick's head, causing him to die. And at this point, Anton blames the weed. It's not him that's killing everybody. He's trying to rationalize it by saying it's the weed. He tells Peanut that he should probably leave or else he might kill him too. But this is when Anton's hand stops the door from closing. And there's a chase montage for a little bit. Peanut ends up running down to the basement, even though you can't escape from there. And Anton quickly meets up with him. Peanut attempts to escape again by running up the stairs. And Anton kills him by throwing a table saw blade to the back of the head, causing his head to be chopped off. Apparently the hand, at this point, this is when I learned the hand is played by Christopher Hart, who is a magician. And after this all happens, Anton, he walks upstairs to go watch some TV. At this point, as he's watching TV, there's a montage of the hand controlling him, basically. And there's a point where he's sitting on the couch, and the cat crawls up to him and laying on his lap. And he tells the cat to go away, but his hand ends up controlling him. And the hand grabs the cat by the tail and swinging him around. And apparently the window is open at this point, and the cat and Anton throws the cat out the window and just happens to land into Molly's front yard. And this is when at this point he has the courage to ring Molly's doorbell, who again Molly is played by Jessica Alba, but the hand forces him off the balcony into the bushes where the cat ended up landing. And this is when we get terrible one-liners from Anton trying to hit on Molly as she's walking out. Eventually, she invites Anton into her room, and he admits that he ended up reading her lyric book. And she's so pissed off about this, but ends up forgiving him, and she puts on some music. And this is when the hand takes control of Anton again. As he picks up a knife with Molly's back to him, Anton ends up stopping the hand from killing her. And Molly, at this point, she says, "Don't you know there's a killer out there?" And this is when she puts on some music. And the hand, Anton ends up walking up behind Molly and spanking her on the ass. And they proceed to do the dirty deed. And there's one point where they're getting it on, and the hand tries to take over Anton again and starts to choke. It starts to choke Molly. And he ties up his hand onto the bed to make sure it doesn't move or hurt her. And she's like, "Ooh, you're kinky." And there's more awful softcore porn dialogue. And all this happening, it cuts to Debbie again, and she is on her way to the town where Anton lives in. And Molly and Anton, they do the deed, and her parents end up coming home, so Anton leaves and sneaks out her window. We're back at Anton's house, and he's burying all the people that he has killed at this point. And this is when we learn that Mick is apparently still alive. Peanut, he ends up knocking Anton out with his shovel, and he wakes up the next morning in his room. He thinks that all of this was a bad dream, and as he walks downstairs, Mick explains that him and Peanut are actually the undead, and he goes on to say that they were on their way to heaven, but it was just too far of a walk, so they decided to come back. This is just like the laziest fucking writing I've ever heard. Like, you couldn't even write that in, so you're just like, alright, we're just gonna bring him back alive because that happens. And after this, there's a memorial for, at first I thought it was the two cops, because I thought that Anton had killed the cops already, but it's just two restaurant workers that he ended up killing from the news report from earlier, and they were killed. And Randy, who is played by Nicholas Sadler, who is Kubrick from Twister, if you don't know, he's hitting on one of the girls that's mourning the two at the memorial. He's really creepy, and he's like asking if she's still in high school and hitting on her. It's super fucking creepy. And Anton, at this point, he shows up, and according to Randy, he is cock blocking him from getting it on. But whatever. Anton, he shows up and cock blocks him again, like I mentioned, and that he needs Randy's help, but he refuses to help because, again, he's cock-blocking him. Anton, he runs into some safari-themed restaurant that Randy goes to all the time as he's going through the drive-thru, and he thinks that Randy knows all about the devil because he listens to heavy metal. And he's just like, it's just music, man. It's not really all about worshiping Satan and everything. He's like, it's not what it's about. And like, it's, again, like, it's satanic panic and all that bullshit that they're trying to combine into this film. It's just totally absurd. Randy finally gives in to help Anton, and he goes on to tell Anton to keep his hands busy and to use his hands more because Randy is driving some idiotic pickup truck that he works on all the time, and says that's what keeps him from getting out of trouble, so, pick up a hobby. So what is Anton doing? He goes back home, and he starts to pick up knitting, and while he's knitting on the couch, he's watching Rob Zombie's Dracula music video. And I remember that song being played on every single video game that I've ever played, every single action movie, every single horror movie in the 90s, like, especially Twisted Metal. Like, I played Twisted Metal all the time as a kid, and every single Twisted Metal game, there was at least one Rob Zombie song on there. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Rob Zombie's music. He probably should just been focusing more on music more than he is a director or writer, but that's not my place. But he's sitting there watching the music video, and Mick and Dead Peanut are sitting on the couch next to him, and there's more homophobia, there's more stupid jokes that they tell. And the two idiot cops from earlier, they end up showing up because they get a noise complaint. And the two idiot cops realizes that Anton is the killer at this point. They don't care about proper justice, apparently, and they just storm into the house without a warrant. And this is when Peanut chimes in when Anton asks what he should do. And one of the cops, they end up getting scared by Peanut's dead body speaking up, and they shoot Peanut square in the head. Mig goes on to say, well, if it wasn't for that, I would say you probably shouldn't kill him. But they shot Peanut, so you should probably just kill it too. And he wants to be cuffed with the needle still in his hand because, mind you, he's knitting. But the cops don't agree that they should do this. And this is when Anton, he ends up sticking one of the cops with a knitting needle through the ear hole and in the other ear hole. And after that, he ends up, as the cop is falling over, Anton pulls over to grab one of the cops' tasers, and he ends up tasing the other cop after him. I forgot to mention that all of the doors were open and all of the windows were open while all of this is happening. It's nighttime, but still, like, there's, like, all this noise going on and nobody's hearing it, really. Like, 40 minutes into the film, this is when Anton attempts to cut off his hand with a guillotine-style slicer because he realizes that his hand is possessed and he's not the one doing the killing. But that slicer doesn't work because Peanut, he chimes in and says that couldn't even cut a bagel if it tried to. And he asks Mick to grab the electric carver from the cupboard, and it doesn't work again. Anton, he attempts to use a butcher knife, but the hand moves anytime he tries to use it. So he tells Peanut to bite down on his hand, and he's able to cut it off that way. And Mick, he grabs the iron and burns the stub off so he can stop the bleeding. And Mick and Peanut run out to get the first aid kit for Anton because apparently they don't have one in Anton's house. And he's not screaming at all at this point or not freaking out. Like, if your hand was cut off, you would be screaming bloody fucking murder. Like, you'd be like screaming like on Army of Darkness, like Bruce Campbell shit. Like, you would not be like, oh, I just got my hand cut off. Oh, it's whatever, man. But eventually, Anton, he realizes that his hand was cut off, and he falls onto the ground and starts to pass out. And this is when he noticed that there's writing on the ground, on the floor, and it's written in blood. It says, "Bad move, Anton," in quotes, and written in blood. And Molly, she is at the door waiting to go to the school dance. Because mind you, he was trying to ask her earlier on in the film if she wants to go. And the hand is attacking Anton, coming back to life. And he has the idea to throw the hand in the microwave. And Molly, she ends up getting impatient and tries to come in. Peanut eventually make it back to Anton's house with the first aid kit. And this is when Anton tells Molly to go to the dance without him because it's not safe. Meanwhile, Mick and Peanut are attempting to heat up the burritos that they had got from Mick's house in the microwave. And they open the door to the microwave, and they notice that the hand jumps out. But they think nothing of it, and they just go about their day. Like, this is what they've been trying to fight all day long and all night. And, like, you're just going to be like, it's not our problem anymore. Fuck it. Just let it fly out. And Anton, he runs out telling that they shouldn't have opened the microwave door. but they shouldn't open the microwave door, but they end up doing it anyway. And this is when it cuts to the hand slowly walking itself down to the street of the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Debbie is finally in town, and she's at the local bowling alley to look for the hand, because apparently that's where you'd find a possessed hand at. And this is when Randy tries to hit on her, and they end up grabbing drinks together. Debbie explains why she's in town, because Randy asks, well, we finally learn where they're actually located at, and Randy's like, well, what are you guys doing in bowling for? There's nothing going on here, really. And Randy ends up mentioning that about Anton's hand, because he was freaking out to Randy earlier about the hand. And they end up heading to Anton's place, and the gang is trying to take Randy's truck at this point. Debbie is going after the gang, and they get away in Randy's truck. They back out of Randy's driveway, but first they run over Debbie and causing her to pass out. And it sends her flying with the worst CGI effect ever. Well, she's extended from a rope and they're pulling her back, but it's the worst effect ever. And this is when Randy administers CPR. He's like, oh, this is the perfect time to lay my moves on her, and is ready to take another innocent victim. And we're at a couple's car where Curtis, Steve Van Warmer, who is in Bubble Boy, and Tiffany, who's played by Kelly Monaco, they're getting it on in Curtis's car. And the hand ends up feeling up Tiffany, and she notices that the hand is eventually crawling up her, and ends up choking Tiffany to where it cuts up her head, choking her, and killing Curtis too by bashing his head against the car window. Anton and the gang, they get to the dance, they walk in, and the band is playing, and guess who it is? It's the Offspring, but they're covering I Want to Be Sedated by the Ramones, and the girls, apparently, because Mick and Peanut are already at the dance, the girls like Mick and Peanut's costumes, not realizing that they're actually dead. But they're supposed to be looking for Molly at this point. The creepy principal, it cuts to a random cut to the creepy principal. And he's arguing about his credit card not working to a phone sex operator. And he ends up having phone sex while the hand ends up crawling through the window. And eventually up into his leg. The principal's name is Principal Tidwell. And he's played by Timothy Stack, I guess. And this is when the hand crawls up his pant legs and up to his dick and ends up strangling it to where it apparently kills him. I'm not entirely sure. We're just assuming that he's just grabbing him by the dick and strangling him. And Randy eventually make it to the dance, and they're on their mission to look for Anton. Debbie ends up running into Anton and tells him how she can stop the hand from killing anybody else. And she's like, I know the final solution, and she pulls out some gigantic knife trying to kill Anton. Anton ends up stopping Debbie and explains that he already cut off his own hand and that it's on the loose to go after Molly next. And Debbie says that the hand is going to take her to hell at midnight. And Anton looks up at the clock. He's like, oh, that's fine. It's not a big deal. We got plenty of time. And the clock says it's 9 p.m. their time. But apparently she is basing it off of 6 minutes till midnight in Druid time. We don't know this because it's very lazy writing, and I feel like they just threw that in for the hell of it. But Debbie, Randy, and Anton, they make it to the dance floor as the Offspring plays their song Beheaded. Anton, he ends up jumping on stage and pushes the vocalist Dexter Holland out of the way, saying that there's a killer on the loose and that people don't believe him as he's saying this, and they just end up laughing at him. But at this point, Dexter Holland is still on the stage, and the hand falls down onto him, causing the hand to rip off his scalp. And this is when everybody runs. Molly and her friend, and they end up escaping the chaos, and they crawl through the vents or the air ducts to get away. But they notice a fan at the end of the duct when she's like, all right, we're going to get out of here. I'm going to find a way. Molly, she uses her friend's shoe to stop the fan. And Molly makes it down with a rope from her friend's utility belt. Meanwhile, Mick and Peanut are also crawling through the vents. Her friend won't jump down while they're trying to climb down. But the hand ends up sneaking behind Molly's friend, and the rope is pulled back up, tying it around her neck and causing it to hang herself as the hand kicks the shoe out from the fan and causes her friend to basically get chopped up in the fan descending from the rope. And this is when Molly runs into the art room, and a ceramic plate falls on her. I'm not entirely sure why. And the hand is disguised as some stupid, creepy puppet. And Anton runs back into the art room because he heard the noise. and attacks it as he walks into the art room, and Mick and Peanut end up falling onto Anton, and Anton is holding down the hand, but the hand is actually getting away from him, and ends up getting away and tying Molly up to the roof of a car that's in the school's shop class. And there's a pentagram on the ceiling, as we can see, with spikes around it, and the hand is trying to raise the car up with Molly on it to kill her or send her to hell, I guess. Anton and the gang, they try to pry the hand off of the lever that's pulling her up, but the hand just won't get off. They can't get the hand to be removed. And this is when Mick, he ends up finding a bong of some sort. It's like a Mick-shaped bong. And Mick and Peanut, they end up smoking a bowl. Anton is like flipping. I was like, why the fuck are you guys getting stoned right now? And Mick ends up talking Anton into getting stoned. He's like, do it, Anton. It's for the strength. You need super strength to get this hand off the lever. And Anton at this point has the idea of getting the hand stoned. And this causes the puppet that the hand is within to get stoned. And you realize that he is stoned because his eyes are bloodshot. Well, his eyes roll to the back of his head and come back out, and it looks like his eyes are bloodshot. And, well, whatever, it doesn't matter. They end up stopping the hand just on time. Debbie and Randy run into the shop class as Anton tries to swat the hand away because it ends up jumping back up alive and trying to attack Mick. And this is when Debbie throws the special knife that she was trying to attack Anton with earlier. And she ends up throwing the knife at the hand, and the hand also goes through Mick as well. And it's so anticlimactic, and Mick mentions it as well, because the hand just poofs into thin air, basically, and nothing dramatic happens whatsoever. Anton eventually gets Molly down from the car, and Mick wants to smoke the bong too, but accidentally hits Peanut in the head with it. I'm not entirely sure what exactly happened, but he ends up accidentally hitting Peanut in the head with a bong, and Peanut falls into the lever of the carport or whatever, and Anton is still under the car whenever this happens and gets crushed by it. But don't worry, there's more lazy writing, and instead of just going to heaven, he stays back alive, and he's just in the hospital in a full body cast as Molly is taking care of him. Mick and Peanut, they just show up as guardian angels. They go on to explain that they are Anton's guardian angels. Mentions that he's hungry and he wants to go to the cafeteria, and Peanut also wants to check out the nurse and be a creep. And he's like, Mick asks if Anton wants anything. He says, sure, I'll just have a candy bar or whatever he's craving. They end up leaving, going to the cafeteria. And this is when Anton is looking up at the ceiling, and he sees I'm under the bed and writing again. Setting up for a sequel, I'm assuming, but this is how Idle Hands ends. Like I mentioned before, this film came out when I was, 4 years old, and I saw it whenever I was around 10 or 11. And I still didn't remember anything about it from just the original viewing of it when I was younger. And it's just disappointing to review it back and realize that I don't actually like this movie. It's just so lazily written. And well, at least in the second half, like 15 minutes in, it's just so lazily written where you just don't give a shit anymore. Like the whole part where Debbie chimes in saying that, oh, it needs to be midnight druid time and not our time. Like, we didn't know any of this whenever we are first introduced to Debbie. She's like just chasing after the hand, and we don't know anything about why this hand is actually attacking people in the first place. Like, at least give us something to where you're not so vague and we actually need to give a shit about this hand and why it's killing people. But instead, you just go on the fly with the writing, and it's just poorly written, and not to mention the terrible protagonist, at least the main protagonist, Anton. He is so unlikable to where you feel zero remorse for him whatsoever, even towards the beginning. Like, they introduce him, and he's like the laziest piece of shit. Like, in the intro, whenever they're introducing him, and he's like going through his morning routine, he's just like in his underwear making cereal, and he's yelling out to his mom, like, yelling at her to go get cereal because he's too fucking lazy to go get cereal or get milk from the grocery store. And like, it's just little things like that, and we're supposed to feel bad for him, but he's just like the laziest piece of shit that just like sits down on the couch all day, watches TV, and smokes weed. Like it's just so aggravating. I feel like like Mick, he is a really likable character in the film. Like Seth Green was probably the most likable actor in the film. And it's really disappointing to say because Seth Green, just in general, isn't a great actor. He's a good voice actor, but he's not a great actor. This film is supposed to be a horror comedy, and I don't think I laugh more than 2 times max. Like, it's just, like, Mick and Pino, whenever something serious is going on, they'll just chime in with the dumbest one-liner jokes that don't add any value whatsoever. It's just that typical 90s try-hard comedy that's not funny anymore or super outdated. Like, they'll make a ton of homophobic jokes. They'll call him a queer for picking up knitting. And it's just all this other bullshit that's not funny anymore. I guess just because it's a super dated film, it's not funny anymore. But it's probably funny back in the 90s. But you know what? Homophobia isn't cool anymore. So I don't want to watch a dated movie talking about how funny homophobia is. Or how funny misogyny is. Like, none of this bullshit is funny. Like, I enjoy a good horror comedy as much as the next guy. But, again, I laugh maybe 2 times max. And none of the jokes were tasteful whatsoever. And it seems like, it's sort of like whenever you're like 15 or 16 years old. And you're just sitting around with your friends and just telling the stupidest dick jokes that you could ever come up with. And that's what they threw into this film. That's the extent of this quote-unquote comedy. As the kids would say, this ain't it, Chief, and this movie fucking sucks. So, yeah, that was Idle Hands, fortunately. But next week, we are talking about one of my favorite films of all time from 1985, continuing on the horror theme, and it kind of aligns with Avengers. People are going to be so mad. They're like, this doesn't fucking have anything to do with the Avengers. What are you talking about? But yeah, it's one of my favorite films from 1985. I post about it a lot, so if you guys follow us on social media, you'll probably kind of guess what I'm talking about. It's one of my favorite franchises of all time, and I cannot wait to talk about it. That I don't tell you guys what films that I cover next, because I like keeping you guys on your toes. But if you feel like following the show, you can go ahead and do so by following us on Twitter, @CCMPod. You can follow us on Instagram, @Cult Classic Mania. And if you feel like supporting us monetarily, you can go ahead and do so by going to patreon.com/cultclassicmania. With all of that being said, I am your host, Matthew, and this has been another installment of Cult Classic Mania. I will talk to you all next week.
In peace. Fuck ass, give me a beer!
Yeah, welcome back to the cinema. This is not for the typical. Time to feed the occipital lobe with the films that I call my home. Buckle up, settle in, while we break it down a bit. Got a new take, make an old film relevant. About to give attention to the unsung revenants of the film industry. That's a wrap, let's riff.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Cult Classic Mania.